Hello everybody, I'm Nubicus Maximus, and I came across this video the other day by Pop Culture Detective called How the Last Jedi Defies Expectations. And I have to admit, this video definitely went in a direction I did not expect based on the title. And for some reason, it struck a nerve, so I'm going to do a rebuttal for it. Now I'm going to edit the original video for time, cutting out some of the spaces between commentary. The link to the original is in the description below. Feel free to take a look at it before you watch mine, and if you think I cut something that shouldn't have been cut, something that changes the message and how it's presented, feel free to call me on it. Let's begin, shall we?
The Last Jedi is a movie that's designed to subvert audience expectations. Nowhere is this more evident than in the way the film handles its three male heroes: X-Wing pilot Poe Dameron, renegade stormtrooper Finn, and legendary Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker. Initially, all three characters seem like they should fit neatly into familiar archetypes for men in action-adventure films. In Poe, we expect the hotshot fighter pilot who's celebrated for blowing up the bad guys.
Lock and load.
That's because that's how he was set up in the previous movie.
In Finn, we expect the noble defector who's determined to take down an unjust system.
Really? Because that's not how he was ever portrayed in the previous film. Finn's main motivation is, and always was in both movies, Rey. That's it.
And in Luke, we expect the wise warrior who wields tremendous power in the name of fighting evil.
Well, that one's true.
But in each case, The Last Jedi doesn't deliver on those expectations.
Or any other expectations for that matter.
At least not immediately.
Or ever.
Instead, director Rian Johnson throws fans a series of curveballs. Over the course of the first act, Finn reveals his self-centered and defeatist attitude.
Finn was leaving to find Rey, so Rey wouldn't come back into a firestorm. Defeatist? Maybe. Self-centered? Not really.
Poe proves that he's reckless and arrogant,
And saves the lives of everyone in the fleet, only to have them thrown away later by Holdo.
and Luke is so consumed by paralyzing guilt that he's renounced the Jedi and become a hermit.
Bet you didn't see that one coming, did ya?
These unexpected character twists are part of the reason why some Star Wars fans left the theater in a state of shock, which rapidly mutated into fits of rage on the internet.
Who knew Star Wars fans could be passionate about Star Wars?
Now, to be clear, we're not talking about people who just happen to dislike The Last Jedi. It is, after all, not a perfect piece of cinema.
Finally, we agree on something.
No, we're talking about the subset of mostly male superfans who felt betrayed and personally disrespected by this movie.
Ah, here we go. The mostly male superfans. Now this is a bit of a theme I've noticed in videos by Pop Culture Detective. Now to be fair, I've only watched a few minutes of a few videos, but in that time it's pretty clear to me that there is a pattern developing.
We find some troubling and deeply unhealthy ideas about stoic masculinity. The show is relentless in making fun of its male characters for not living up to traditional expectations of manhood. And I'm always on the lookout for positive Hollywood representations of masculinity.
When I looked at his page, I discovered that he has also produced videos for Feminist Frequency. Not that there's anything wrong with any of this or his perspective, but it is important to note the perspective with which he is viewing these movies. Let's continue.
The objections from that particular group are wide-ranging,
The two were accompanied by a girl.
but they often involve an obsessive level of scrutiny when it comes to female characters.
What girl?
That's because the female characters were unusually poorly written for Star Wars films, to the point where they defied reality, not because they were female, but because they were dumb.
On the more extreme end of the spectrum, fan complaints have a tendency to devolve into wild conspiracy theories about the Disney Corporation pushing an agenda of forced diversity or feminist propaganda.
Wild conspiracy theories, he says.
But there is a common thread running through much of the backlash that speaks to an underlying anxiety. an anxiety rooted in deep-seated insecurities about masculinity. Let me briefly explain what I mean by that. Leading men in action-adventure movies are expected to be decisive, righteous, respected, and to take charge in most situations.
Leading females in the same role are expected to do the same thing. Also, Owen Grady is a goofy character who is saved by his ex-girlfriend, and Captain America gets his butt kicked all the time.
Men are expected to achieve success by becoming progressively more and more powerful as the story unfolds.
It's almost like there's a character arc or something, like a journey or a story the movie is trying to portray.
This expectation is part of a long-running tradition in Hollywood,
Yes, storytelling.
and the formula is so entrenched in mass media that many fans feel aggressively entitled to seeing that particular version of manhood reproduced on the big screen.
No, we're used to that version of storytelling. Well-written female characters undergoing the same storyline, and the same story would work just as well.
But as The Last Jedi begins, it quickly becomes apparent that this movie isn't interested in catering to a simple vicarious power fantasy.
Or the fans, or the Star Wars universe, or logic, or physics. I also want to hit on the idea that he is going after here, that men, and men only, watch movies to fit a certain fantasy, or a fantasy of power. Most people consume entertainment of various forms, be it books, movies, or video games, as a form of escapism from our daily lives. We don't always associate with the powerful characters, but we do associate with the ones that are well written and expressed to us in a way that allows us to feel what they are going through.
All three male heroes are presented as vulnerable in their fallibility, with each displaying their own set of rather significant character flaws and inadequacies.
This has always been a feature of the Star Wars universe, showing characters grow. There's nothing wrong with that. And the fans that are angry at this movie are not mad because the male characters are flawed. We're mad because only the male characters are flawed in ways that don't fit with the histories and backstories of the characters before this movie.
Now, flawed heroes, in and of themselves, aren't all that unusual in speculative fiction. In fact, failure, and then learning to overcome that failure, is just the standard recipe for structuring a basic character arc. I'd argue the intense fan hate surrounding The Last Jedi has a lot more to do with the fact that the male heroes in this movie are directly challenged on their failures by women.
And I would argue that if you replaced the female characters as is with male characters, give them the same dialogue, the same acting ability, and comparable wardrobe choices, that you would still get the exact same displeasure of the characters. They are simply poorly written in every way.
This is not something that's supposed to happen to space cowboys or space wizards in Hollywood blockbusters.
Mainly because when you have spent this much money on a movie like this, you expect the story to make a hell of a lot more sense.
Women aren't supposed to interfere with a man's heroic journey.
You would be just as angry if out of nowhere a male character came in and tased Ellen Ripley just as she was about to go save Newt.
So let's dig a little deeper into the unexpected ways that men are held accountable for their behavior in each of the movie's three intersecting storylines. As many critics noted when The Last Jedi first hit theaters, the theme of women challenging male bravado is most evident in the character arc of Poe Dameron. Poe is a hotshot fighter pilot. He's impulsive, he's arrogant,
Disengage now, Commander. That is an order.
and he cares more about being a big damn hero than he does about effective strategy or even the lives of his compatriots.
Absolute and total bullshit. The reason Poe Dameron is doing what he is doing is because the Dreadnought is a fleet killer, stated several times in the movie, and they are on a fleet. albeit a badly designed one. Poe is not the only pilot that flies into this. None of the other pilots seem to have an issue with it at all at this point. But apparently only Poe is the one that's wrong here. Also, there are female pilots and gunners in this scene. Had he not killed this ship, it would have destroyed the Resistance. And if not the Resistance ships, it would have gone on to destroy something else.
The gung-ho rebel pilot is a familiar archetype in Star Wars media, and as a result, we think we know how it's going to play out.
Because only a fool would take something that works and muck it up for no reason.
A fool.
Audiences expect the good guys to bring down the enemy death machine in a giant ball of fire. And we expect to revel in the joyful spectacle of impossible explosions in outer space.
Is it really too much to ask from a movie that's title can literally be interpreted to mean space explosions? I mean, really?
But instead of framing Poe's daring raid on the Dreadnought as cause for celebration, the movie suddenly pulls the rug out from under us.
You're demoted.
And this is part of where things started to go downhill more rapidly for this movie. It makes no sense to chastise him for doing what he did. For muting Leia, yes, he shouldn't have done that. But they took down a fleet killer with the loss of just a handful of ships. That ship could kill thousands of people, if not more, and a handful of brave pilots stopped it from doing just that. They can and should show the cost of that, but don't chastise those pilots for doing their jobs. I mean, seriously, exactly what kind of resistance is this?
Well, wait, we took down a dreadnought.
At what cost? There are things that you cannot solve by jumping in an X-Wing and blowing something up.
40 years of Star Wars movies has proven this to be a lie.
Poe is rebuked for his apparent victory, and by extension, the audience is rebuked for enjoying the fireworks.
Again, rebuked for enjoying explosions in space, in a movie that's name literally means space explosions. Wow.
Those explosions that we were taking such pleasure in just moments ago are abruptly reframed as cause for self-reflection and sadness. And we find ourselves suddenly confronted with a narrative about consequences.
No Star Wars movie before this one has ever shown the cost of sending brave men and women into battle in order to stop pure evil. Not one movie. Ever.
For some Star Wars fans, it must have felt as if Princess Leia had just reached out of the movie screen and personally slapped them across the face.
No, but it did feel like she might have been off her meds. You know, given her history of being a military leader that should have understood what was done and why.
Now, it's noteworthy that blowing up the space fascist death ray isn't framed as morally wrong.
Why would it be? I mean, like, seriously, why?
Instead, we're asked to consider the tactical and human cost of that violence.
Here the narrator is framing the act of destroying a weapon capable of killing thousands, if not millions, as a simple act of violence, not as self-defense, not as a logical tactical move in an ongoing war, or as it should be called at this point, given it's only a few days, if not a few hours after Force Awakens, as an invasion of the Republic. We're just supposed to look at it as pure violence, in a movie with the word wars in its title.
If ever a beloved leader is incapacitated, we expect our brash hero to suddenly find themselves in command.
No one expected Poe Dameron to be in command in this situation. There are several ships in this fleet, all with experienced captains. Poe is a fighter commander, not a fleet commander. Most fans expected Admiral Akbar to be the one to take over, but he was sucked into space. This is crap!
But that doesn't happen either.
The chain of command is clear as to who should take her place. Vice Admiral Holdo.
The who now?
Vice Admiral Holdo is even less sympathetic to Poe's attitude than General Leia.
I've dealt with plenty of trigger-happy flyboys like you. You're impulsive, dangerous, and the last thing we need right now.
Impulsive, dangerous, skilled, capable, loved by his subordinates, a hero of the resistance. He's exactly what you need right now.
She harshly chastises Poe for his recklessness and rightly dismisses his antics as a liability to their mission. And this is really what's at the heart of why so many angry fans tend to hate Vice Admiral Holdo's character so much.
Oh, this should be good.
Poe Dameron's story is that of a cocky, headstrong, never-tell-me-the-odds style male hero who is repeatedly reprimanded.
You have bet the survival of the Resistance on bad odds and put us all at risk?
Until he finally learns to listen to and trust women in positions of power.
Bullshit! He adored Leia from the first scene in Force Awakens. He repeatedly asked Holdo for just the knowledge that there was a plan in existence. He didn't even want to know what the plan was, just that it existed somewhere. We dislike Holdo because she's a bad commander who is incapable of doing the most basic task that a leader is supposed to do: encourage, control, and inspire her followers. Instead, her troops mutiny.
As Episode 8 begins, Finn is a man obsessed. He wants nothing more than to find his friend Rey and then get as far away from the war as he possibly can.
Given that he just had his back sliced open by a lightsaber some 72 hours earlier, I can't imagine why that would be on his mind. Find his friend, get the hell out of here. Is it an admirable quality? No. But Finn is a bad character. What do you expect?
Finn's intentions are selfish and driven by a lack of faith.
2 movies into the sequel trilogy, and I have no faith in the Resistance either. They are disorganized, poorly funded, and led by morons. I'd leave too. That doesn't mean I wouldn't continue the fight with a more capable group. It just means I'd want out of this group.
He's convinced that the fight against the First Order is a lost cause.
Only because the Resistance is more inept than the First Order, which is super impressive, given just how inept the First Order is shown in these movies. I personally blame bad leadership.
Enter Rose Tycho.
Tico. Her name is Tico.
A low-ranking maintenance worker who's a fan of Finn's exploits from The Force Awakens. When she realizes he's not really the committed Resistance hero that she's heard stories about, her disappointment is palpable.
Apparently, you're not allowed to leave the Resistance.
Rose takes on the role of Finn's guide and mentor.
The blind leading the blind.
She's the one who pulls back the curtain to expose the oppression festering just below the surface of the galaxy. Unlike Leia and Holdo, Rose holds no formal position of power, but she does speak from a position of moral authority.
At great length, whether you want him to or not.
She articulates the political and moral reasons why the Resistance is necessary, and in doing so, she inspires Finn to finally identify as a rebel.
He should already know that the First Order is bad, given that he was a part of it. And since when is the Resistance resisting capitalism? Or for that matter, since when are they the rebellion?
And it's her role as moral compass to both Finn and to the audience that's responsible for a good portion of the rage directed at Rose's character from the more toxic side of Star Wars fandom.
I would be remiss in my duties as commenter if I did not point out that yes, Kelly Marie Tran has been the target of the toxic side of the fandom. But the toxic side of the fandom is not nearly as big as you imply it is. It's simply very loud. The rest of us who have a problem with Rose Tico have that issue because there is no subtlety in the moral points that she is putting out. They are poorly written and don't feel right in a movie like this, especially one that is this long.
Many of these guys can't help but view a woman who is serving as teacher to a male hero as anything other than preachy, annoying, or emasculating.
Rose Tico is preachy, annoying, and emasculating. Not because she is a woman, but because she is written that way. If the character of Rose Tico was played by a white male character and given the same lines, they would be just as annoying and just as disliked.
The fact that Rose also happens to be played by an actress of color only magnifies their anger.
For the toxic minority, yes. For the vast majority of Star Wars fans who simply want a good, well-written movie, no. Again, she could be played by a white male and would still be hated.
The other reason for the backlash against Rose is because she interrupts Finn's big heroic sacrifice.
Buckle up, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go.
During the film's final battle, Finn embarks on a self-destructive charge. His heart is finally in the right place, but his judgment is clouded by his eagerness to act on his newfound convictions. As the movie makes clear, Finn's suicide attack is doomed to fail. Poe tells him so.
No! Pull her off! What? The cannon is charged! It's a suicide run!
Rose tells him so.
It's too late, don't do this!
No! I won't let them win!
And we see Finn's rickety airspeeder falling apart around him. But Finn is so focused on striking a blow against the First Order that he can't see how ineffective this strategy is.
You're leaving out the fact that Finn knows what this weapon is. Somehow.
A battering ram cannon.
A what now?
Miniaturized Death Star tech. It'll crack that door open like an egg.
It would make sense that you would know whether or not this strategy is effective. The audience is assuming it will be because we have all seen movies before.
Understanding that his action amounts to a noble but senseless sacrifice, Rose steps in to save Finn from himself.
And ends up killing both of them while sacrificing the entirety of the resistance in the process. One stupid action kills everyone.
Good job.
Seriously, call this like it is. Rose saved Finn because she was grieving and attached herself to Finn in an emotional way as a replacement for her sister. It's a very human response. It would be understandable even if it didn't seem so completely out of place and so poorly done.
The heroic sacrifice is part of a long tradition in media, wherein death is framed as a way for men to prove their bravery, their convictions, their love, and even their manhood.
You're half right. It's almost always viewed as a way of proving their convictions and love, giving their life for the cause they fight for and the people that they love. A noble gesture. I have never seen a movie where a person sacrifices himself knowingly simply to be brave or to defend their manhood.
And movies tend to romanticize images of men going out in a blaze of glory.
For the right cause, yes. It's called heroism. It's something to be aspired to, not criticized.
Even when their sacrifice is senseless, ineffective, or unnecessary.
The narrator seems to forget that the death of Jack in Titanic is never, ever held up as an example of a good, noble sacrifice, and instead as a stupid point of drama in a bad movie.
This notion that death, and violent death in particular, is redemptive or restorative for men is so deeply ingrained in media that many angry fans are adamant that Finn's misguided kamikaze attack would have succeeded, despite the film explicitly telling us otherwise.
First off, no one thinks that death is restorative, except in the instance where the act of sacrifice happens because the character has again found his or her courage to stand up to evil. The restoration is what allows the sacrifice, not what causes it. Secondly, the movie does not explicitly tell us that this would not work, just that it's a suicide mission, and this is coming from Poe, who at this point has been broken and beaten down thanks to Holdo. I also find it funny that you're spending all of this time talking about Finn's sacrifice and forgetting another very specific sacrifice.
These fans are incensed that a woman got the big damn hero moment. And she got it, in their view, by robbing a male hero of his chance at martyrdom.
No, we're angry because her actions should have killed both of them. They should have been killed in the crash, or killed by the walkers, and by doing this, she would have let the Resistance die if it weren't for Luke Skywalker showing up to save the day. Let's also not forget that after this scene, Rose kissed Finn. Now, I'm no expert, but that face doesn't look like this was a wanted sexual advance to me. Feel free to discuss in the comments.
When Rey finally meets her hero, the legendary Jedi Knight isn't at all what she expected.
Something that goes against Luke Skywalker's character so much that even Mark Hamill referred to the character as Jake Skywalker.
Luke Skywalker has become a cynical old hermit.
Picked up on that one, did ya?
A man so consumed by fear and guilt that he's turned his back on the Resistance and closed himself off to the Force. Needless to say, this comes as a tremendous shock, both to Rey and to the audience. Like Rey, many Star Wars fans were expecting Luke to appear as a triumphant badass, the one they remember, or rather misremember, from the original trilogy.
Actually, I think most fans were looking to have Luke be an older version of himself, filling in the Yoda, Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon role. A wise instructor who would actually help our hero to grow.
The thing is, Luke was never really depicted as a great Jedi warrior.
Luke was depicted as a Jedi Padawan growing into a Jedi Knight, although the term Padawan wouldn't exist until the prequels. Given his amount of training and his age, he fit his persona just fine. Unlike other characters in this movie that just seem to pull maneuvers out of nowhere and do them perfectly the whole time.
When Luke says this,
You think what? I'm gonna walk out with a laser sword and face down the whole First Order?
his words are a reaction to Rey's assumptions. But those lines can also be read as a response to fan expectations.
You're completely right. The fans expected Luke Skywalker to be a Jedi Master after 30 years, not a broken, disconnected old man. How dare we?
As I mentioned earlier, it's assumed that Hollywood heroes, especially men, will grow exponentially more powerful over time.
It's like they have a character arc or something, and it's expected the heroes will grow more powerful irregardless of gender. Keep in mind, this is said in a movie containing a female character that does everything perfect on the first attempt without putting forth any real discernible effort.
The expectation is that once a man has conquered his demons, those demons will stay conquered forever.
The expectation is that once a character, regardless of gender, conquers their demons, that new demons will rise up for them to conquer. That they are constantly in a cycle of struggle, failure, regrouping, and then victory, only to come back around to the next struggle. You know, like all of us in normal everyday life.
But even though Luke rejected the dark side back in Return of the Jedi, his struggle to resist the temptation of absolute power isn't over. And he's still scared of the darkness hiding inside himself, just as he was as a young man back on Dagobah.
And to the fans, this felt completely out of nowhere. We watched our hero conquer this side of him, but due to poor writing, discovered that 20 years later, and seemingly far, far more capable, Luke Skywalker, a hero who was willing to give his life in an attempt to save his family member, discovered that another family member was in danger of going in the same direction, and decided right off the bat to kill him, without even trying to save him. Are you able to see why we're a bit confused here? Does it make sense? The massive gap in logic here?
Although this older version of Luke Skywalker is consistent with his characterization from the original trilogy,
Okay, I'm better now.
angry fans still believe that The Last Jedi represents a downgrading of his power and his status.
It does, as well as a downgrading in his writing and the overall quality of the story. Pointing this out, like it's a flaw in the fans, does not make it a flaw in the fans. It is still a flaw in the movie, one that we are simply pointing out.
The fan fury is exacerbated by the fact that it's a young, untrained female Jedi who challenges this mythic hero on his failures.
Mainly because being a Jedi has always been shown to be something that you had to work at, something that took time and effort to achieve. Rey put in neither time nor effort, and it takes away from the storyline. It kills the hero's journey that helped us to be invested in the original movies. The fact that Rey is a woman doesn't come into play. We would feel the exact same way if it was a male character.
Not only does this young woman reprimand the great Luke Skywalker, she directly confronts him and inspires him to reconnect with the Force.
Something that annoyed the fans to no end because it was a stupid plot point put forward by a character that we did not like.
Later on, Yoda offers guidance too, but it's Rey who opens the door for Luke to overcome his paralyzing self-doubt.
How?
So instead of seeing the old Jedi Master teaching Rey how to wield the awesome power of the Force,
I feel something.
Audiences are treated to scenes in which Rey reminds Luke what it means to be a Jedi.
Something she knows absolutely nothing about.
Of course, Rey isn't a more powerful Jedi than Luke.
Unless you watch the movie, at which point you can very easily walk away with that impression.
And she ends up being wrong about her ability to fix Kylo Ren.
Need to have something for the sequel, don't we?
But she does possess something that he's lost. Rey still has hope. She still has conviction. And she still has clarity of purpose.
Things Luke Skywalker should have never lost. And things that don't really fit, given that from the character's perspective, she has been off of her desert wasteland of a planet for barely a week, if that.
The idea that a young woman like Rey would have something important to teach an older, mythic male hero like Luke Skywalker is erroneously viewed by some male fans as emasculating.
If this had been written in a way that made any sense at all, it wouldn't be viewed as emasculating. Instead, it feels like we are simply supposed to accept that Rey, regardless of gender, is correct. Because.
It's worth pointing out that angry fan defensiveness isn't necessarily just a reaction to women existing in popular science fiction stories. If women are included alongside male heroes in a way that doesn't overshadow, upstage, or interfere with traditional expressions of masculinity.
Let's get one thing straight. I'm in charge out here. You do everything I say exactly as I say it.
Excuse me?
Just relax.
First off, you're trying to point out that because a character who is trained to handle and understand not only wilderness survival and animals, but especially dinosaurs, is telling another character that happens to be female to do everything that he says, that this is a dominant masculine trait. I'd hate to tell you, but if the roles were reversed and Claire was the raptor trainer and Owen was the park manager, I'd expect the same conversation to be given. The difference is the male character would be clearly shown understanding that he is massively out of his element and that he should listen to the person that knows what the hell they are doing so he doesn't die. Not to mention that Claire saves Owen later on in the movie.
Then we don't see these same kind of extended temper tantrums from male fans, especially if the female characters in question are cast as young, white, and conventionally attractive.
I give you Zoe Washburn. In case you hadn't noticed, she is not your typical young woman bombshell. She is beautiful for all the reasons that make her uniquely her, and if you have actually seen Firefly or Serenity, you would know that she is by far the strongest character there, not only in physical strength, but strength of character. I have never, ever heard anyone complain about Zoe Washburn. Ever.
The Last Jedi isn't satisfied with simply including women. It goes much further, and puts female characters in positions of institutional power or moral authority over male heroes.
Which would be just fine if they were well written, but they are not, so it feels very forced and unrealistic.
The movie then has those women leverage that power to challenge and ultimately force change in men's behavior.
Yes, they break Poe of all the qualities that made him a good character, and they humiliate Luke Skywalker. Finn grows a bit and tries to actually save the people he now cares about, only to end up having that taken away from him. Are you able to see why this pissed us off? Even a little bit? I mean, just tiny bit?
And that is almost unheard of in a major blockbuster film.
Actually, it's a very common trope for the females in the male characters' lives to inspire them to be better than they are, as well as it is in real life. I wouldn't be half the man I am now if it wasn't for my channel mate and girlfriend, Cryptic Enigma, but she encourages me to grow in ways that fit my personality, and not by kicking me in the balls on a daily basis.
No, I did not punch him in the balls.
In the end, our three male heroes face up to their mistakes and overcome their failures.
In the dumbest ways humanly possible.
Poe learns from Leia and Holdo to put aside his desire for heroic short-term gains.
Let's go. No, wait. Wait.
and instead consider the bigger picture.
Exactly how he had always done when he destroyed the Dreadnought, a ship that would go on to kill thousands who would have no chance of stopping it. He gave up short-term gains of the fleet escaping, risked his own life, and sacrificed the lives of other pilots who also took the risk to destroy a massive threat. The way he behaves at the end of the movie seems more like a beaten-down version of himself. What they really needed was a line of Poe yelling at Leia, asking why Holdo never bothered to tell him the plan. That was all he ever wanted, a simple understanding that there actually was a plan. Nothing more.
It's only through Rose's moral insights that Finn comes to believe in something bigger than himself.
DJ showing him the recordings that prove that the bad capitalists were selling weapons to the Resistance gets glossed over in this video because DJ is a male.
And Rey succeeds in inspiring Luke to be the best version of himself again.
She's just so Rey like that. Everyone she touches is inspired and becomes their best version, and then dies. Because...
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
And ultimately to do the exact thing he mocked her for earlier in the film. Luke does indeed end up walking out with a laser sword and facing down the whole First Order.
No, he doesn't! Luke is sitting on a planet light years away meditating himself to death. That's why it annoys us as fans. If Luke had walked out and faced down the First Order and then died in a well-written battle in a good way, we would have accepted it. Instead, he uses a Force gotcha and then dies from it.
Have you even seen Star Wars?
Despite what the reactionary conspiracy theorists claim, this is not an agenda of masculine inferiority.
You're right. It's horrible writing passed off as a Star Wars movie.
Women in The Last Jedi hold their male counterparts accountable not out of animosity, but because they genuinely care about them.
Men, if you have women like this in your life, run. Just run.
Male heroes are not being diminished or erased in this movie. In fact, a lot of time and effort is devoted to giving men transformative arcs.
Heroes go in, broken shells come out.
The Last Jedi is a story about men learning to trust women's ideas and decisions, and then becoming better people and better heroes because of it.
Which doesn't feel forced at all, especially considering that the female characters are poorly written, have no actual story arc or growth, and just dropped in out of nowhere with no actual background or setup, and are simply forced into the story in a way that is designed to make people hate them, only to have them be right in the end as a way to make us go, well, they were right. Maybe I'm a sexist. When the reality is, it's just poorly written. Holdo is a terrible commander who fails at the most basic parts of being a good leader. Rose is a blunt hammer driving home points that don't need to be in a Star Wars film. Yes, animal cruelty is bad. War profiteering is bad. War is bad. Excellent points in a movie that doesn't have the word war as part of its title. Rey is a terrible character who goes through no adversity, defeating the main villain twice with only a minor scratch to show for it, one that she didn't even get from the main villain, and then beating Luke freaking Skywalker in a fight in which he was using a stick, and she pulled a lethal weapon on him to win. His own weapon. And Leia, a general who has been running military operations her entire life, seems to have no ability whatsoever to understand how war works, simply because the writer is trying to make a point that war is bad in a movie called Star Wars. Not to mention adding in no backstory about how she learned to be a super Jedi in her free time. The fans hate this movie not because it is women in power, but because it's poorly written in every single facet.
And while that might be an unexpected message for a Star Wars story, it's a vital lesson that men need to learn if we are to achieve gender equality.
There are numerous other sci-fi shows that portray strong women in positions of power. Babylon 5, Stargate, Firefly, Alien, Terminator, just to name the ones off the top of my head. You have never, ever heard anyone complain about there being women in these movies. Why do you think we are complaining about the ones in this movie? And don't tell me it's because it's Star Wars. Star Wars has plenty of strong women. Leia in episodes 4 through 6, Padme in episodes 1 through 3, Ahsoka Tano, and numerous other female Jedi in Clone Wars. There's even a female pacifist in Clone Wars who has played directly against Obi-Wan Kenobi as a way of showing that sometimes fighting is not always the way. But it's all written well. It's all written in a way that makes sense, and that is the problem that we have here. It's not that this movie is filled with women in power or minorities, it's that it's badly written. Why can't you see that? To say something nice about the video, it is extremely well made and well edited. The narration sounds great, and at no point does the quality of what's on screen go down. I wish my own videos had this level of production quality. I'm actually quite jealous. Good job, guys. But overall, this idea that the Star Wars fandom is sexist and racist and toxic is just not accurate. Sure, there are toxic fans. There have always been toxic fans. There always will be. In every genre that exists. Everywhere. But those toxic fans are few and far between, and simply yell louder than the rest of us. To lump all of the fans that are displeased with something into a toxic group simply disenfranchises us and makes us far less likely to support your product. It also makes us the focus of rage from fans that liked the movie. And don't get me wrong, if you liked the movie and were able to take something from it, that's great. We didn't. We thought it was poorly written, poorly executed movie that didn't fit into its own trilogy, no less into the wider Star Wars universe.
Anyway, I'm sorry, but that just happens to be how I feel about it. What do you think?
Let me know in the comments.